Okay, so Ian Garry versus Michael Venom Page has just happened, and my immediate thought is that there needs to be a rematch, to be honest. And this might be a little bit of a controversial take, but I think that last round should honestly be scored as a draw. I think you can definitely make the argument that Ian Garry had more control time, but he wasn't really doing much with it. The first round was a fairly dominant display by Garry with his grappling. He was threatening the rear naked choke quite a lot. Makes sense they went to him. He had much more control time, much more of a submission threat. Second round, MVP kind of rallied a little bit. He was getting a lot of significant strikes. If you look at the stats, it was something like 8 significant strikes by the end of the second round, but these strikes were hitting him hard. He was getting some good 1-2s in there, a couple of close head kicks, and you saw that the speed advantage was just there with MVP. Garry threw a couple shots and they were like, this far away from MVP, as in they weren't even close to hitting, to be honest. I think this is a classic example where one fighter had clear dominance in the striking, the other one had clear dominance in the grappling. Third round started well for MVP. He was able to actually be in top position against Garry. But the thing is, Garry's jiu-jitsu is clearly superior. He's been training with Charles Oliveira and Damian Maia. It makes sense. MVP kind of looked a little bit amateur in some of the grappling, and that's not to say that I'm a grappling expert, but you kind of see that the commentators were pointing out. You saw him, for instance, in the third round not shaking him off when Garry was on a full mount. As Joe Rogan was pointing out as well, when Ian Garry had him in the body triangle, he wasn't trying to sort of roll to the side, put pressure on the ankle there, which allowed Garry to really rack up a lot of control time. But although I think you can definitively say that Garry won the third round, it really wasn't a dominant performance by any means and quite a weird fight to score. And in this case, I honestly think the round should have just been given as a draw. It seems that there's a lot of aversion in the UFC and combat sports in general to give 10-10 rounds, but honestly, if there's no clear winner, then why should you give it? I understand that it's a bit disappointing to watch a fight and think, there wasn't a definitive winner there. But honestly speaking, just because they gave Ian Garry the win doesn't mean that people are going to think, wow, okay, that means he's the much better fighter. We've all seen what happened in that fight. Ian Garry did not show a dominant display of that, and if anything, Michael Venom Page did more damage over the course of the fight. Garry had a couple submission threats, but that's sort of it, and in the third round, he was really not threatening at all. He was just too high up on that mount to really get anything. And this is kind of something that Garry needs to work on, because he keeps talking about himself, his nickname is the future. He called for a title shot after this, saying he's 15-0 and he deserves the title, he's coming for it, it's inevitable. But if you're really going to try and go for the title, you've got to show that you're better than everyone by a large margin. If he had a dominant display over MVP, okay, I could understand him asking for a title shot. MVP is no slouch, right? But that wasn't a good performance against MVP. He was clearly outclassed in the striking, and over the course of the fight really didn't deal any damage to him. He had a couple decent submission threats, but that's it. I think MVP kind of knew that he'd lost that fight. You could see just he sort of accepted it. And hopefully he's going to work on his grappling, because fighters are going to be seeing that and realize if you can get past his blitz, then you just need to take him down. Because although I think Garry has worked on his grappling, I think his success in the grappling was less because Garry was super good and more because MVP showed some basic mistakes and wasn't really able to effectively grapple defensively. It was a good fight, to be honest. I was definitely on my toes for it. I think when you've got someone as sort of explosive as MVP, you're always going to be on your toes. I know a lot of people are going to call this a snooze fest because there was a lot of sort of just time where people were grappling basically, and MMA fans hate it for some reason when fighters mix the martial arts. I mean, look, I understand there was a lot of control time when nothing was really happening. There weren't really too many submission threats, there was no ground and pound, so in that sense, yes, it was boring. But when you've got someone as explosive with MVP in the striking, it's always going to be exciting when they stand up. And on top of that, I do think it is a legitimate strategy by Garry. He seemed to realize that the striking was just far too risky, and in my opinion, he was outclassing it, so of course he's going to mix it up with the grappling. And it would have given him that submission threat during the striking. But ultimately, as I say, I think there needs to be a rematch. It wasn't a dominant performance by Garry. And if we're scoring the fight just on damage, then MVP wins clearly. Of course we're not, so I believe Garry was right to win by MMA scoring. I just think that the MMA scoring should be changed a little bit here. There should be a rematch for this. I suppose my only concern is that I don't see a rematch really going that differently. I mean, of course, MVP could work on his defensive grappling, but I think there will just be a lot of holding. This is one of those matches which on paper looks very exciting, but to be honest, I was thinking it might be a snooze fest because there would be a lot of defensive counter-striking going on. Both of these guys rely on their counter-striking a lot, and then when you get sort of two counter-strikers together, oftentimes you just see them waiting for each other. I was thinking we could even get something like a Yoel Romero versus Israel Adesanya situation where they're both sort of just very tentative, no one's really throwing a strike, people are too scared to get countered, and instead we just got the classic take them down to the ground and hold them there, lay and pray tactics. And to be honest, I don't think the fans would really want to see a rematch because I wouldn't expect it to be very different. It would still kind of be the same boring style. But let me know in the comments about that. Would you guys be interested in seeing a rematch at all? I know the UFC won't do it. They're trying to build Garry as a star. MVP just needs to do a couple of fun fights. I don't think he's entitled to pick. I don't think he's in the title picture at all, especially with that lack of grappling. But Ian Garry, they're trying to build up his record. He's now 15-0, which does look very good on paper. But honestly, I'm not on the hype train. He's not really had many dominant wins. He's not given me a reason to think, okay, this is the future. This is the guy who's going to get the title, especially in such a stacked division such as welterweight. But we'll see what happens. You know, maybe he'll prove me wrong. But let me know what you think, guys. It's currently 4 a.m. in the UK. So to all my UK fans and European fans out there, shout out to you. We're in this struggle. First card of the main event. You know, it wasn't the most amazing fight, but, you know, we're moving on. We're moving on. And now it's just the women's fights to keep us awake. But thank you very much for watching the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.